Xi Jinping will hold a bilateral discussion tomorrow on the sidelines of the 16th Brics Summit. And this is the first engagement between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Chinese President Xi Jinping after the Galwan clashes of 2020. The first steps being taken after China and India agreed to disengaging their troops at the two remaining friction points, which is Rezang in the northern part of eastern Ladakh and Demchok in the southern part of eastern Ladakh. The Foreign Secretary also clarified disengagement that has taken place in the earlier sectors that had been decided earlier. Those conversations did not take place in the current round. The conversation started quite some time back but continued till very late at night or till very early in the morning yesterday when both India and China decided to disengage their troops in Rezang and Demchok. But what next? How does this disengagement take place? We'll talk about this in greater detail and what it translates into action on ground militarily over the course of the next half hour. But before we move on, let's quickly listen in to Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri.
I can confirm that there will be a bilateral meeting held between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping tomorrow, 23rd of October, on the sidelines of the Brics Summit. The exact time and other logistics are being worked out, but the meeting will take place tomorrow. I can confirm that there will be a bilateral meeting held between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping tomorrow, 23rd of October, on the sidelines of the Brics Summit. The exact time and other logistics are being worked out, but the meeting will take place tomorrow.
Misri has been India's ambassador to China. He's an old China hand. But what does this disengagement or an agreement to disengage mean and translate into action on ground? How does disengagement and can disengagement or an agreement to disengage ensure that the troops do not clash the way they did on the either sides of Pangong So or something that led to Galwan clashes? And I put that question to the Foreign Secretary just moments ago right here in Kazan, and whether this will ultimately lead to de-escalation and de-induction. Listen in to my question and the Foreign Secretary's response.
Sir, namaskar. मेरा नाम गौरव सावंत है. I work for India Today and आज तक. सर, चीन के रुख में ये परिवर्तन आया कैसे आपकी दृष्टि में? और जब पेट्रोलिंग दोबारा रिज्यूम होगी तो फिर बॉर्डर पे ट्रूप्स के क्लैशेस ना हो जाए, क्या इसका भी कोई मैकेनिज्म है? और डिसएंगेजमेंट तो हो रहा है, क्या डी एस्केलेशन और डी इंडक्शन की भी बात हो रही है?
अभी जो अरेंजमेंट्स और अभी तक जो समझौता हुआ है उसे पहले हमें ग्राउंड पे इम्प्लीमेंट करना है. ये एनालिसिस कि ये कैसे हुआ, इसको मेरे विचार में बाद में देख सकते हैं. आपने कहा कि जो आगे फेस ऑफ्स न हो, क्लैशेस न हो, उनको कैसे रोका जाए. मेरे विचार में बहुत ही ये एक अहम आपने सवाल, एक अहम मुद्दा उठाया है. और हमारी आशा है और हमारा प्रयत्न रहेगा कि जो अरेंजमेंट्स वर्कआउट हुए हैं, जिन पे समझौता हुआ है, वो ऐसे अरेंजमेंट्स हो जिनसे इस तरह के क्लैशेस रुक सकें जो पीछे हुए हैं कहीं कहीं पे लाइन ऑफ एक्चुअल कंट्रोल के पास. तो इसमें आगे हमें देखना पड़ेगा और लगातार प्रयत्न करना पड़ेगा, लगातार कोशिश करनी पड़ेगी कि जो मैकेनिक्स हो जो अग्रीमेंट के, वो ऐसे रहें कि इस तरह के जो क्लैशेस हैं उनको रोका जा सके. जहाँ तक आपका अंतिम प्रश्न है कि डिसएंगेजमेंट हो गया है या हो रहा है और डी एस्केलेशन और डी इंडक्शन की बात कहाँ आती है, मैं फिर से यही कहूँगा कि अभी हमें पहले डिसएंगेजमेंट पे फोकस करना है और डी एस्केलेशन और डी इंडक्शन की बातें सही समय पे होंगी.
So very crucial. Remember, India and China, they've lost soldiers at the line of actual control after Chinese actions first in Doklam in 2017, which led to, of course, friction, but 2020, which led to Galwan clashes. India lost one commanding officer and 19 braves at Galwan. China officially confirms it had lost 5 soldiers, including the commanding officer of their regiment. But according to Russian wire agency TASS, China had lost more than 40 soldiers in the clashes at Galwan. So the two sides have shed blood after a series of agreements had been put in place from 1993 to 1996 to 2014, and yet the clashes took place. This agreement, the biggest question is, will China honor it? If you look at all the agreements that had been in place in 1993, 1996 to prevent border clashes, and of course 2014, that there would be no hot trailing of soldiers, and China wanted that in place, yet China violated all those agreements, and the transgression took place at Galwan. There was an attempt at Pengongso on either side, North Bank and South Bank, which ultimately resulted in India's quid pro quo operations on the Kailash Hills, dominating the Chinese Moldo garrison and the G219, a very crucial strategic road of the Chinese. And only then did a disengagement took place at multiple locations initially, which were Gogra, Hot Spring, North and South Bank of Pengongso, PP 15, 16 and 17 Alpha, and now of course Depsang and Demchok. We need to see how that action takes place on ground, what mechanisms have been put in place to ensure that soldiers don't clash once again. But there's another big story that I want to get you on this broadcast, and that is the bilateral meeting between Prime Minister of India Narendra Modi and the President of Russia Vladimir Putin. And at one point of time, the Russian president said, you don't need a translator. The body language and the relationship between India and Russia are so strong. So Prime Minister Narendra Modi briefed the Russian president about his visit to Ukraine, his interaction with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, and an effort to find peace. But while that's an important aspect, what's also very crucial is the bilateral relationship in the field of defense, in the field of nuclear energy. Remember, India is a developing country, and India requires energy, nuclear energy, oil and gas, which India has been getting from Russia at very competitive rates or discounted rates, and that's held India in good stead. Fertilizers for farmers, and not just for India but for global south. That's been extremely important. But for the moment, I want you to listen in to Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri on the India-Russia relationship and how it's growing from strength to strength.
Leaders also shared perspectives on the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Prime Minister reiterated that dialogue and diplomacy was the way forward to achieve resolution of the conflict. He briefed President Putin about his engagements with the Ukrainian leadership and noted that India stood ready to contribute in bringing peace.
And joining me now on this special broadcast are Xenia Kondrateva, a journalist and a strategic affairs analyst who joins us from Kazan. Also with me on this special broadcast is Tara Kartha, one of India's foremost voices on India-China, India-Russia relations and on strategic affairs. And Xenia Kondrateva, I want to come to you first. You heard Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri. What do you make, one, of the trajectory of the India-Russia relationship, and subsequently, of course, I'll come to you on the India-China aspect. But first, key takeaway for you in the meeting between President Putin and Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
Hi, Gaurav. Thank you so much for having me on your show. I think what is important today is the warmness of between the two leaders that we have seen, and these kind of things at that high level of engagement between the leaders, they do not happen, by. So that's one important aspect. Now, when
Okay, Xenia, give us a moment. We seem to be having an issue with your audio and video link. The large number of journalists that we have here from across the world for this Brics Summit. If the effort of the West was to isolate Russia, you just have to come to Kazan on ground to see that clearly is not happening. Given the number of heads of state and governments who are here, 5 new crucial additions to Brics, including Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Egypt, Ethiopia, and of course Iran. And President Pezeshkian and Prime Minister Narendra Modi had a very, very good meeting, we are told. But I want to come to Tara Kartha for just a moment on the India-China aspect. Ma'am, you heard Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri on one, the disengagement process and the pitfalls ahead. What do you make of this extremely crucial, moment in the history of the two countries where there's an agreement on disengagement, even at Depsang and Demchok, which China used to see as a legacy issue? What do you make of this extremely crucial, moment in the history of the two countries where there's an agreement on disengagement, even at Depsang and Demchok, which China used to see as a legacy issue?
Yeah, I think it's pretty dramatic, right? Can you hear me?
Where there's an agreement on disengagement. Okay, give me a moment as we try and reestablish that audio link. So from Kazan, to New Delhi, we seem to be having issues with the network in a situation where connectivity is key between India and in India and the world. But I want to now, for a moment, also switch focus to the third major development that's taken place today, and that's the bilateral between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian. He's just been elected. And Iran has also just been made a part of the BRICS. So two crucial developments there. India and Iran say civilizational ties. India also played a role in Iran becoming a part of BRICS. That's point one. And point two, this was the first meeting between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the newly elected president of Iran. Both countries close civilizational ties, and from what sources tell India today, Iran also respects the fact that India is very, very close to Israel, and yet the relationship with Iran remains on an even keel. There was a dialogue on dialing down tensions and pressure. Iran fired 181 plus ballistic missiles on Israel. There is apprehension that there could be a massive strike back from Israel. And the hope is that it will not cause massive damage to civilian areas. Will it actually mean that targeting only military installations in Iran and not their oil infrastructure, which could impact oil prices globally, the nuclear infrastructure? Now, India and Iran talked about dialing down tensions. Let's once again, listen in to the Foreign Secretary on this aspect. When we asked President Masoud Pezeshkian how was his meeting with Prime Minister Narendra Modi after he came down from that meeting, well, he said it was a very, very good meeting. Tara Kartha, if I have that audio conversation back with you, ma'am, I want to understand from you what you make of this disengagement agreement between India and China. Why now? And what is it likely to lead to when the bilateral meeting between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Xi Jinping takes place tomorrow?
I see it's a very dramatic kind of a thing to happen just before an equally dramatic, meeting in Kazan, right? Here you have somebody who is apparently under arrest from an international warrant for his arrest, President Putin, sitting and chairing this huge meeting. So where's the, that itself is dramatic enough. But the India-China, one hopes, this is, it's pretty huge, especially like you said, every part of it, right? You've been there, done that kind of thing. Those are areas where I never thought that Depsang would get sorted out, to be honest. So if all that is happening, it's a definite sign of hope. But the thing is, as a former foreign secretary said, China has this tactic of a noose, it tightens and loosens. So when it gets bugged with you, it will tighten the noose. So right now, it is loose. But there are, as you know, there are issues which are ahead in terms of disengagement that can all be sorted out. But the question is one of trust. Will China pull back its troops sufficiently to the pre-2020 levels where you have a degree of comfort? Can you, I mean, and the main thing is here, I think, Gaurav,
Yes.
is that just yesterday, I think they've had a live firing of Taiwan. Okay, it's a very, very high, it's a sudden increase in their tensions on that side. So China will want to keep this side quiet for the time being. So everybody knows that. We all know that China is in this place where it doesn't want more enemies than it can handle. Also, there will be a bunch of countries watching to see what happens between India and China. Nobody is going to be very happy if India and China get along well. So there are a lot of roadblocks along the way. There are a lot of choices you have to make. You know, if you're getting friendlier with China, that's not something your US and the others are going to like. But this is, I think, from President Modi, I mean, from Prime Minister Modi, it's a pretty big initiative. And one hopes, because if these two countries get together, then BRICS
Okay.
becomes active.
Oh, absolutely, and especially these three countries, RIC, get together. That's truly a game changer. Russia, India, China. In case they are on the same page, it's an absolute game changer for the world. However, in RIC, it's the C factor that just cannot be trusted. Given the fact, and who knows that better than you, ma'am? 1993 agreement, 1996 agreement, 2014 border defense cooperation agreement, the BDSA, and yet, despite the BDCA, you've had what happened at Galwan. After Galwan, very clearly, India perhaps will never ever trust China unless it can verify. Now, this disengagement, what do you make of the verification process that India would seek, and how do both the countries ensure? Before I bring in Zina Kontrateva once again, ma'am, how do these two countries ensure that the troops don't clash once again, or if you talk about pre-2020, there isn't another Chumar-like incident, or there isn't another incident, like Demchok, that Chinese soldiers come in, stay for some time, 10 days, 20 days, 30 days, and then go back.
No, I think one good thing, which from what I read in the press, I don't know what actually it is. One good thing in this is the groups are going to be 15 soldiers each. So they've kept the numbers down so that there's not an inadvertent, heightening of tensions. Number two is the fact that you're going to be meeting frequently. That is built into this. So the moment you talk, then the tensions reduce. But the point is what signaling China will give to its troops, because the troops will follow what Beijing says. And we saw what happened when the hero of Galwan was given all kinds of honors. If that kind of thing is going to happen, then it's not a good show. Also, they are increasing their military capabilities. Their SIGINT, for example, in Shigatse, there's a huge facility which has come up. They have, like I mentioned in another show, there is a settlement which has come up next to Pangong Tso, which are 38 kilometers from Pangong Tso. Huge settlement with about 100 plus buildings. Is this for the PLA? Who is it for? So this is all stuff going forward. But as of now, as of this moment, it is a definite sign of hope. If these two giants can get along, like you said, then there is, you can shift even climate change. There's so much of potential. But the key is trust. And like you said, it will be trust and verify.
Yes.
How to verify, that is the key. So that means you're going to have overflights, you're going to have satellite imagery, you're going to have to do all of that to ensure, and your own imagery, not somebody else's. It's not someone else giving you intelligence, because that could go badly wrong. So you have to have your own capabilities for trust and verify.
Okay, if we were to see the situation on borders vis-a-vis Pakistan, Pakistan wants peace with India, and it wants that so-called Ramzan ceasefire when it faces trouble along the Durand line or all along the AFPAC border. When it's facing heat there, it wants peace at the LOC with India. The moment they are comfortable there, terrorism increases on this border. In your appreciation, is China doing just the same piece on this border so that it can increase pressure, as you rightly pointed out, on the Taiwan board, on the Taiwan-Taipei belt? And how do you think would countries like the United States or all the countries of the Indo-Pacific, and India is such a crucial member of the Quad, be looking at these developments here in Kazan?
Yeah, they're not going to be very happy if we get, if you're going to get too close to the Chinese. But the fact of the matter is, which the US and everybody else knows, that as neighbors and as people, like you said, have had a very shaky history in terms of clashes, it's going to take a while to get to the level of your relationship with the US is so multifaceted. I mean, I can't even count the number of working groups we have with the US, right? It's huge. We have a very good relationship with Russia
Yes.
as of now. That is also working very well. So the fact is that there is a limit how far you can go with a neighbor. You're in with this kind of history, both powers are rising,
Okay.
both have strong leaders, and they know that. So the trick is what I think this government is doing beautifully is managing all the relationships together. I mean, let's hope that continues as long as China sees a profit. Profit. When I say profit, I mean strategic profit in cooperating with us. It will continue to do so. As of now, that is the case.
That's the message that India has been trying to send across all along. Will China see dividends of peace, that peace pays richer dividends than conflict, where China too has lost soldiers and goodwill in India? But does China truly care about goodwill, or does it only want to move forward on brute force, which of course was stopped at Galwan? But Zenia, if I have you back, I want to understand from you the role that Russia plays now in the Brics Summit. If America's or the effort of the West was to isolate Russia, what do pictures in Kazan say? I want you to tell me what you've seen all along. The number of heads of state and governments who are here. Describe to me what you see in Kazan.
Right. I hope the network is back. I think it's unprecedented for a BRICS summit to be that big, because we all remember how it started from a small grouping on a sort of paper at a level of a concept coined by American economists. It has become a strong geopolitical force, I would say, that makes the West concerned. And if we read Western analytics on BRICS, it's always, anti-West, they're challenging the West, they're challenging the dollar. But then when you actually hear what the BRICS members themselves are trying to say, they say, we are not.
Okay. Okay. Well, Xenia and Tara Kartha, for joining me here on this India Today special broadcast from Kazan in Russia. Many thanks. For the moment, I also want to get you to a lighter side of our visit to Kazan. When Prime Minister Narendra Modi arrived here, the Indian diaspora was here in large numbers to receive him. And these were Indian medical students. Over 1,000 Indian medical students are studying here at the Kazan Medical University. Of course, there are also Russians here in Kazan and across Russia who are learning Indian dance, from Kuchipudi to Bharatnatyam to Odissi to the latest Bollywood dance, and they were extremely excited to perform in front of the Prime Minister. I caught up with some of these young Indian medical students, and I caught up with these Russian dancers dressed in traditional Indian attire to receive Prime Minister Narendra Modi, also members of ISKCON and Brahma Kumaris. I leave you with these images of the grand reception Prime Minister Narendra Modi received here in Kazan, Russia.
कजान में जो नया कॉन्सुलेट खुल रहा है, उससे आप लोग का क्या लाभ होगा? वे कॉन्सुलेट इतना महत्वपूर्ण क्यों है भारत का?
सर देखिए, हमें कोई भी इमिग्रेशन या और किसी भी काम के लिए मॉस्को जाने की ज़रूरत नहीं पड़ेगी। वो हम कजान में ही रह के कर सकते हैं, और ये हमारे लिए बहुत लाभदायक होगा, क्योंकि हम लोग स्टूडेंट हैं और स्टूडेंट के लिए समय बहुत महत्वपूर्ण होता है। ये हमारे समय को बचाएगा।
क्या उत्साह है जो आपको अपने शेड्यूल से अलग यहाँ लेकर आता है?
It's like gonna be once in a lifetime experience for each and every one of us here. That we'll see our Prime Minister for the first time, and also हम यहाँ पे like MBAs भी कर रहे हैं, and उसके साथ साथ अगर हम अपने Prime Minister को देख पाए तो उससे बड़ी बात है।
मैं श्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी को एक ही चीज़ बोलना चाहूँगी, वी लव यू, हम आपसे प्यार करते हैं, मैं उछिंदी विश्वास और मेरे लैंग्वेज में आमी तोरे बहुत प्यार।
आप मुझे बताइए आपका उद्देश्य क्या है?
अभी तो बस मोदी जी को देखना है। हम सुबह से 7 बजे से इधर आए हुए हैं और मैं अभी 6th ईयर में हूँ। लकीली इस साल मुझे मिल रहा है मोदी जी को मिलने का अवसर, तो आई एम वेरी हैप्पी फॉर इट।
How was it performing for the Prime Minister?
It was very excited. We was so nervous.
Why were you nervous?
Because we rehearsed this dance about 3 months and now it's the time to show it. We were so nervous.
You were?
You were.
Did you enjoy?
Yes.
When did you start learning the Indian dance?
When I was 4 years, my mom decided me to Indian dance in our town. So now I'm dancing here.
What all dances do you know? What all Indian dances do you know?
What all Indian dances do we know? Kathak, Bollywood, Garba, Bharatanatyam, Kuchipudi.
How many of you have been to India? Have you been to India?
No. Мы очень хотим. We really want to go to India. Go to India. Please.
Rezang 50 Ultra comes with Google Gemini. Motorola Rezang 50 Ultra comes with Google Gemini.
Hi, I am AI anchor Sana, bringing the top headlines for you, presented by Motorola. China confirms agreement with India to end Ladakh border standoff, says it has reached an agreement with India to end the standoff between the armies of the two nations in eastern Ladakh. India extends Taslima Nasreen's residence permit. Taslima expressed her gratitude to Home Minister Amit Shah. Haryana government suspends 24 Agriculture Department officials amid rising farm fire incidents.
As the world turns its attention to the upcoming Brics Summit in Russia, all eyes are on India and Prime Minister Narendra Modi. With key bilateral meetings on the agenda, significant focus will be on Modi's potential discussions with Chinese President Xi Jinping on the heels of a breakthrough along the LAC. Both India and China stand to gain from enhanced ties, especially in trade and technology. As the Brics Summit approaches, experts are looking to Prime Minister Modi to play mediator in the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict. Russian President Vladimir Putin has acknowledged India's role in advocating for peaceful negotiations. India's position as a non-aligned power allows it to maintain cordial relations with both Russia and Western nations, making it the ideal pick for mediating this conflict. With the expansion of BRICS, India aims to solidify its status as a pivotal player in global politics. This summit marks a critical juncture for India as it positions itself as a bridge between diverse global interests. Bureau Report, India Today.
अब बताइए मुझे इन दरिंदों को मिलेगा क्या? क्या वो समझते हैं इससे यहाँ पाकिस्तान बनेगा? आज कई सालों से हम ये देख रहे हैं कि वो आ रहे हैं वहाँ से और हम कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि ये मामला ख़त्म हो और हम लोग आगे बढ़ें, हम लोग मुश्किलों से निकल सकें। मैं पाकिस्तान के हुक्मरानों से ये कहना चाहता हूँ, अगर वो सचमुच हिंदुस्तान से दोस्ती चाहते हैं तो फिर ये बंद कीजिए। कश्मीर पाकिस्तान नहीं बनेगा, नहीं बनेगा, नहीं बनेगा।
Potholes and rain, the two words that have become almost synonymous with Bengaluru. Every monsoon, it's the same old story, but this time there was a promise for change. Despite assurances from the highest levels of the state government, the reality on the ground is quite different. In early September, the Siddaramaiah government assured that potholes would be filled within 15 days. But here we are, almost a month past the deadline, and 1,222 potholes across Bengaluru remain open. India Today decided to conduct a reality check on the potholes menace in the IT hub of India. And it is clear that the civic authorities have a long way to go in fulfilling their orders. These potholes not only make the commute difficult, but also pose serious risks to motorists and pedestrians alike. BJP has hit out at Siddaramaiah government over their laxity in handling the pothole menace, highlighting the challenges that still remain. Meanwhile, the Karnataka government assures that Bengaluru municipal body is equipped to handle the crisis. With more rains predicted and the number of potholes still in the thousands, Bengalurians have a bumpy ride ahead. With Anaga Keshav and Sagai Raj in Bengaluru, Bureau Report, India Today.
देखिए ऐसा है कि अगर उन्होंने प्रेयर किया, उनका प्रेयर मंजूर हुई और बाबरी मस्जिद का मुद्दा का समाधान निकला तो कुछ और प्रार्थना कर लें, आम आदमी सुप्रीम कोर्ट में जाके न्याय ले सके। इतना महंगा है न्याय पाना। मैं यह नहीं कर रहा हूँ, एक चीफ जस्टिस ने कहा। और दूसरी बात, जिस तरह से अनलॉफुली लोग जेल में बंद पड़े हैं, ईडी सीबीआई इनकम टैक्स का दुरुपयोग हो रहा, विपक्ष को दबाया जा रहा है, उसके लिए भी एक प्रार्थना कर लें। तो जो सीजीआई ने कहा वही बात हमने आगे बढ़ाई है और कोई नई बात अपनी तरफ से जोड़ के नहीं कहा।
अब जिस प्रकार की भाषा कांग्रेस पार्टी के लोकसभा के प्रत्याशी वरिष्ठ नेता उदित राज ने चीफ जस्टिस ऑफ इंडिया के बारे में बोली है, ऐसी टिप्पणी इलेक्शन कमीशन पर भी। पीएम को तो 100 से अधिक गालियां दी है, जाति के ऊपर, परिवार के ऊपर, हिटलर की मौत मरेगा, कब्र खुदेगी। और अब सीजीआई को जिस प्रकार से बोला गया है, कांग्रेस पार्टी बताए क्या ये कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन वाले हैं या ये देश के खिलाफ बोलने वाले लोग हैं केवल क्योंकि वो एक व्यक्ति से विरोध करते हैं। ये दिखाता है कांग्रेस संविधान और लोकतंत्र को नहीं, परिवार तंत्र को ऊपर रखती है।
Hello and welcome to an India Today special broadcast that comes from Kazan in Russia. I'm Gaurav Sawant. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Chinese President Xi Jinping are likely to have a bilateral discussion on the sidelines of the 16th Brics Summit, and all eyes on that crucial meeting that could take place in the next 24 hours. India and China have remained in a standoff situation all along the line of actual control in eastern Ladakh since the summer of 2020. While multiple friction points, the situation was sorted out to an extent that it led to disengagement on the north and south banks of Pangong So or Gogra or Hot Springs. Two issues remained. One was Depsang in the north and the second was Demchok in the south. But do remember, the two almost clashed in the east in North Sikkim, actually the tri-junction between India, Bhutan and Tibet, in 2017 in the Doklam region, where Indian troops actually went across and they stopped Chinese road construction. Tension was building up ever since, but it came to a pass in 2020. At Galwan, India lost 20 soldiers. The Chinese, by their own admission, 1 commanding officer and 4 soldiers. But according to Russia, their official agency TASS, the Chinese lost 44 soldiers. After that, 4 years of persistent and perseverant diplomacy, India and China have decided to disengage. That disengagement process has taken place. But how did this come about? We bring you more in this report.
A border breakthrough by India and China. A path that leads to the end of the big Ladakh standoff. A day after India made the surprise declaration that a resolution towards peace had been achieved, China has also confirmed a pact with India to end the standoff between the two armies in eastern Ladakh.
Over a recent period of time, China and India have been in close communication through diplomatic and military channels on issues related to China-India border. Now the two sides have reached resolutions on relevant matters, which China speaks highly of. Going forward, China will continue to work with India to implement these resolutions.
The details remain broad. No deals are ever straightforward with China, and the road to the agreement hasn't been an easy one. It was a result of weeks of intense diplomatic and military negotiations. Caution is probably a good idea before celebrating any real breakthrough, but according to government sources, several meetings involving both the Ministry of External Affairs and the Indian Army did take place, with discussions focused on ensuring smooth patrolling in areas where disengagement has already occurred in eastern Ladakh. But the Depsang and Demchok areas presented unique challenges due to their strategic importance and heightened tensions. Rebuilding trust will be key.
The Chinese side is wanting to restore the relationship between India and China to what it was earlier. It wants the other aspects of the relationship like trade, commerce, investment to move ahead. It will, of course, take some time to restore the trust between the two countries, but at least I think a beginning can be made.
India and China have come to an agreement about normal patrolling and that there will be disengagement. And the Foreign Secretary says that, we are now looking at the resolution of the problem which arose in 2020. This is welcome, but let me put it this way, trust but verify.
The timing of the thaw is also crucial. India improving ties with China comes just when it is being hounded by Western powers over alleged operations to kill pro-Khalistani terrorists in those countries. Many experts believe a defreeze in India-China ties could pose a new challenge to the United States. In fact, that could very much be why the two countries have found an opportunity to at least try setting aside their differences. The possibility of India and China going further in resolving their various other disputes will worry the United States, that thinks India has an important role to play in policing the Indo-Pacific to contain Chinese influence. Closer ties between Russia, China and India could also establish the global South as a counterweight to Western hegemony in a world at war. Bureau Report, India Today.
India and China, two strong neighbors. The largest population in the world earlier in China, now in India. So the two most populous countries, the two Asian giants, one a superpower, one an emerging superpower, and two countries that have shared a very close civilizational link, from the Silk Route to Huanshan to Fahian, coming to India to study Indian culture, the travel, the way Buddhism traveled to China. So there is a very old link between the two countries. And when the two countries became independent, there was also a clash in 1962. India was still dreaming under that Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai euphoria, and Chinese troops, once they came into Indian territory, there was a conflict. The Chinese were stalled in Ladakh, but they came rampaging in the east wherever they were stopped. The Battle of Walong, for example, which led to severe casualties. But the Chinese realized when Indian soldiers stand their ground, the Chinese are forced to retreat. And China only respects strength. But Walong was one incident. Judicial and the very, very famous Battle of Rezang is another instance. But then there were multiple instances in history. 1967 at Nathula, when the Indian artillery opened up and sent across a very strong message to China. Or Sundarongchu, once again, when India was able to send across a very strong message to China. The standoff then lasted close to 5 years. Ultimately, it led to not just dialogue, discussion, but also multiple mechanisms being put in place. And those mechanisms have stayed in place, and several new mechanisms have come up. But then the two countries came very close to a shooting war when China violated those mechanisms. We get you more in this report.
"62 years ago, nearly 1,500 Indian soldiers died, and another 1,500 remained missing forever when India met China on the battlefield. In 1962, independent India was a tender 15 years old, when it was humiliatingly crushed by a far more focused, far more relentless China. As newly established republics in the 1940s, India and China had a healthy and mutual impulse towards each other. The diplomatic affection between the two countries became an undeniable template for a world that was recovering after two destructive world wars and decades of colonialism. In 1951, India refused to attend the conference in San Francisco, where a peace treaty with Japan was to be signed, simply because China was not invited. India, by its actions, made it amply clear that stability in Asia would be threatened if China was left in the cold. At the pinnacle of their famous mutual warmth, In 1954, India and China signed the legendary Panchsheel, an agreement based on 5 principles that would guide and forever solidify their peaceful coexistence. But at every step, as it turned out, India's Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru was being carefully and meticulously deceived. In 1956, China built a road cutting through Ladakh's Aksai Chin area, connecting Xinjiang and Tibet, making the Aksai Chin area far more easily accessible to People's Liberation Army than its Indian counterpart. In the eastern sector, in the then Northeast Frontier Agency, or NEFA, Indian troops began patrolling heights that China saw as a violation of the disputed McMahon Line. In 1961 and early 1962, a series of skirmishes saw the two armies come over closer to a confrontation. Then, on October 20th, 1962, the first Chinese shells came screaming down, and the war began. On October 20th, 3 regiments of Chinese troops mounted a blistering attack along the southern bank of the Namkha-Chu River. On 22nd October, the Chinese attacked Walong on the McMahon Line. After some resistance by Indian counter-fire, sheer numbers overwhelmed the Indian position. Crossing the Bamla Pass, Chinese troops mounted a 3-pronged attack on Tabang. Woefully under-equipped, undermanned, Indian army formations offered no resistance. In 3 days, the Northeast Frontier Agency was gone. The Chinese were in control. But the East was only one side of a terrifying campaign. There was also Ladakh. The situation in Ladakh's Aksai Chin was infinitely worse. Although disputed, it was already almost entirely under Chinese control. On October 20th, Chinese forces opened up their battle in the western sector with assaults on the Chipchap Valley, Galwan and Pangong Lake. The Indian army suffered huge casualties as the Chinese mounted a string of attacks through the western sector. On October 24th, the war abruptly ceased, and there was little or no fighting for 3 full weeks. After 4 days of crushing battle, the Chinese Premier Zhou Enlai wrote to the Indian Prime Minister proposing 4 things: a negotiated settlement of the boundary, that both sides disengage and withdraw 20 kilometers from present lines of actual control, a Chinese withdrawal not in Nefa, and that China and India not cross lines of present control in Ladakh's Aksai Chin. Nehru replied that he was interested in peace but wanted a withdrawal to positions held before the forward deployments that preceded the war. The Indian Parliament declared a national emergency and rapidly passed a resolution to drive out the aggressors from the sacred soil of India. On November 14th, Nehru told